signed by myself, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and Mr. Belliconis.
Mr. Chairman, before we proceed, I would like the record to show that I will be recusing myself from the discussion and deliberations of the board as a board member. I will be recusing myself and seating myself out in the audience as I was informed a few years ago, because I happen to have a relative that owns some commercial property, that there may be a conflict. I don't necessarily agree with it, but that might be, anybody who's got a property owner has a conflict there, inherent conflict. But anyway, that being said, I'd like the record to show that I'll be recusing myself, be seated out in the audience. I reserve my right to speak as a resident and taxpayer, but I will not be participating in the deliberations of the board tax classification hearing.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Belliconis, why don't you introduce our new
Exactly what
finance
I wanted to
director,
do. I
Elizabeth.
wanted to introduce, our financial team consists of our finance director, Elizabeth Paveo, who's brand new, who just began work last week, and Debbie Carboni, who's our assessing manager. The other key individual who's part of our financial management team is the treasurer collector. As the board knows, this is the end of the tax rate setting process. This actually begins about a year ago when we begin plans for the fiscal 2012 budget. When we develop our revenue budget and we develop our expense budgets, which you can get adopted by town meeting, that's really the step that brings us to this evening. We go to town meeting with a preliminary revenue budget. That revenue budget is subject to change until such time as we set the tax rate. And as you know, we went to town meeting several weeks ago, back in October. We voted additional funds available at that time, and those numbers are reflected in the tax rate recap sheet this evening. So what happens is your expense budgets get voted in at the June town meeting and October town meeting. Those numbers are reflected in the tax rate recap sheet before you this evening. And then the revenues are dependent upon a bunch of different sources, but the primary purposes are taxation, which is the matter that is before you this evening, but there are some other key components that comprise the revenue stream that the town does receive, which is state aid, and we receive approximately $8.2 million a year in state aid. Something called other local estimated receipts, $9.6 million a year. And there are other miscellaneous revenue sources that combine the total revenue stream for the town. So you have all of the financials before you. I can say with great confidence the financial team has worked diligently and hard to put these numbers before you this evening, and I know they're prepared to respond to any questions the board or the public may have this evening. I'll turn it over, if you would allow, to our assessing manager, Debbie Carboni, to take us through a presentation.
I'd like to just first welcome Elizabeth, because I don't think the public's had an opportunity to meet her, so welcome.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you? Do you guys need another copy?
I'll take it.
Allison?
It's no different than the one we have electronically.
Exactly, it is.
It's all different.
It's all different?
Completely new.
Probably because you deleted it off the network, Sean.
Red and blue ink.
You don't have it?
Oh, no, I have it. I just wanted
Okay.
to copy that down. But thanks for asking.
As Greg said, this is the final process in setting the tax rate. First of all, I'd like to thank my administrative assistant, Debbie Papier, and my clerk, Lisa Downing. They've worked very, very hard this year. And together we've made a lot of changes within a very short amount of time. With that being said, I'm gonna read just what the law says and how we have to take this process through. The information contained in this handout is intended to provide the Board of Selectmen with the necessary information to conduct a public hearing and information session on classification options available under Massachusetts General Law. The classification amendment allows the board to consider several options that will be explained further along in the handout, and I'll go through those one by one. Excuse me, I do have a cold. Additionally, the decision of the board for each of the options must be submitted to the state's Department of Revenue on the LA 5 form. And that's the form I asked you to sign at the end. Excuse me. The first decision will be made for the selection of a minimum residential factor. That entails whether you want to split a tax rate or keep a factor of 1. Selection of a residential factor. The Board of Selectmen has the option of selecting a factor of 1, which in effect would adopt a single tax rate for all residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property classes, or shifting some of the tax burden off the residential class and onto the CIP, commercial, industrial, and personal property classes. If a factor of 1 were to be adopted, the estimated single tax rate for all classes, estimated currently on the tax recap, is $14.38 per thousand. This rate is determined by dividing the tax levy by the total value of all taxable property in the town of North Reading, and then multiplying that result by 1,000. Our current tax levy is $36,064,791. Our total value of all properties is $2,506,423,743, resulting in a tax rate of $14.38. Currently, we do have a single tax rate. I did go back and look into prior years. In 1988, the town did shift the rate, and in 1984, and those were both for 1 year. And I looked for some supporting documentation, but the storage areas aren't very friendly. For your information, the average residential home value for the fiscal year of 2012 is $450,100. In consideration of that value, the table below summarizes the anticipated fiscal year 2012 average tax bill amounts at various shift intervals. And that's based on the 450, 100. For fiscal year 2011, our average residential home was 409,100. So we are increasing slightly.
Debbie, you're on page 2 right now?
I'm on page 2, yeah?
Yeah, so that estimated FY11 tax bill is supposed to be FY,
12.
okay, because it says FY11
Where does it say
in
that?
the table.
Estimated FY12 tax bill.
And then go down to the next table.
Oh, on the commercial, I'm sorry.
It's just a typo.
Yeah, that's all, I just wanted to
Yeah,
make sure.
I'm sorry.
When I read it, I was getting a little confused, and it doesn't take much to get.
Debbie, prior to Michael making a comment, you said something about the increase in the average house. Could you repeat those numbers? I'm not sure.
Sure. For the anticipated 2012, it's 450, 100. That's the average single-family house value. For fiscal 2011, it was 409, 100.
That's a significant increase in a downed economy when property values have fallen.
Well, it's
How do you
funny that you
explain
say
that?
a downed economy, because what I'm seeing cross my desk for sales, there is there isn't a downed economy showing here for the sale prices that are occurring in the town of North Reading. We certified our values with the Department of Revenue this year at 95% of the sale prices. In other words, what our assessed values were and what the sale prices were coming in, we were at 95. And that's pretty good. We're not seeing a slowdown in sale prices around here.
Residential or all of them in CIP as well?
CIP is stable, but let's take that separately. Right now on the residential, no, it's growing. I mean, we do have the Little Meadow subdivision. That's significant right now. You're talking $800,000 homes up in that subdivision. And he only builds, that developer only builds when he has a buyer. So it's not like he has a lot of houses sitting there vacant, which is important, I think. And it shows, it portrays better to people going and buying as opposed to going into an empty subdivision. So we don't have a decrease in our residential. Additionally, the average commercial and industrial property value for fiscal year 2012 is $910,958. Last year, that was $901,200. So we have seen a slight increase in the commercial and industrial. Not as much as the residential, but we are a bedroom community also. And then that table just shows where the shift would go if we were to shift it at 110%, 1.25, and 1.5.
Does everyone on the board recall how that shift works? Is there any questions there for Debbie?
No,
I don't have a question on the shift. I do have a question on the number, though. So is this the time to, because I assume that the first sheets that you didn't go over yet, the first 4 sheets in your presentation that you didn't go over, the numbers?
I'm not sure what you're talking about, the first
I
four.
think he's looking at the tax recap.
Yes, the tax recap, thank you.
Oh, the tax, I don't have that in my
we
present.
can
I
respond
was
to that.
asked to give
Sure.
that.
If, I just have to ask a couple of questions, to make sure I understand it all. So when you talk about appropriations on page 204, 56 million, I'm sorry, 56.
That was the amount to be raised.
Right?
56,642.
So I go to the page 404, if I'm reading that correctly, and then you got a little chart there at the bottom, A, B, C, D, E. And I understand B, C, D, and E add up to A. So our tax, when you set the tax rate, that appropriates, that's where we collect all the money to basically get to that number? Am I reading that right?
Correct.
Why would free cash be part of that? Why would we tax for free cash?
Because, do you
ahead,
want me to? Your free cash is raised from the overlay mainly. Your free cash is already taken from your residents. That's put into an overlay. If we do not use and send out abatements, that becomes excess, which then becomes surplus. And that's how you get your free cash. So why would you really wouldn't want to do it twice? See what I'm saying? That's why it
That's only a
becomes
portion of
a,
free cash.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. for
does
explaining
that answer
No,
it?
it does. It does. Now I think I understand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now the
Yeah.
numbers.
Bob, you were
Jeffrey.
going to explain, just before Mike made a comment on the,
I asked if any of the board members wanted an explanation of what the CIP shift was.
yes, I would like
You
to
want
have
an explanation?
yes.
Could you explain that to Mr. Yule?
On the CIP shift, if you were to take and the minimum residential factor with our values in residential and our values in the CIP which is CIP is commercial.